So Bill thinks that this was a great topic, but too broad.
I
That we
didn't
could
say that. I didn't say it was too broad. I said it was very broad,
Yes.
very good.
but not too. Some things have to be broad.
One thing we
I
know with a
I
Bob topic, it's never going to be boring.
true.
No.
I was thinking about this topic a lot yesterday, when Dolly Parton died and there were all of these tributes to her. And one of the tributes talked about how she was so different from the zeitgeist of the times because she was the sort of person that tried very hard to love everyone and not, separate people into different groups, and how she was liked by people on all sides of the political spectrum. And it made me think about your topic, Bob, because they mentioned the zeitgeist of the times as being sort of the opposite of Dolly Parton. It's very interesting.
That's interesting.
I really enjoyed the article in Medium that listed the 40 things.
So did I. That was the best one, I thought. Although I had to sign up to be a member to read it.
Yeah, I didn't do that. So that was probably one of the only one or two that I didn't read. So
Oh,
Ditto,
it's worth
ditto.
you. It doesn't cost anything to be a member, and you can unsubscribe if you want to. But
yeah.
it was good because it listed all these different aspects of, um, well, how things are changing, and I felt like a lot of us were were all embedded in the 20th century zeitgeist, but now everything's changing. We're in the 21st century zeitgeist, and there's a little bit of a adjustment. We don't really know what it is exactly.
Bill, that is a absolutely brilliant point, which is hidden in a lot of the reading, but you have brought it out of the closet. We all have to go through each day understanding that we are creatures of the 20th century. And if we look around us and we don't understand what the young are doing, that's why we're not here yet.
I know. When my dad was 89, he said to me one day, Bill, he says, I don't think I'm going to mind dying. And I said, really? And he said, well, I would rather be around with all you guys. He says, but I don't even know what's going on in the world anymore. I watch TV and I see ads and I don't even know what they're talking about.
My mother told me the same thing as she was dying. So I think that's a generational constant. I think if you asked uh, Marcus Aurelius, he would have said the same thing.
Yeah, probably.
I read an article that I sent to Bob. I don't think was in our reading, but I thought it went along with this. It was an article from the Chronicle of Higher Education. I don't exactly remember the title, but I think it was something to the effect, Generation Z, I guess that's the latest generation.
Yeah.
Something like, basically it was Generation Z has no interest in, you know, working hard or accomplishment or all of those kinds of things. And then the byline was, and I don't blame them. And was a person, I think, was a sociologist, obviously more of a 20th century person, but it was going through the various viewpoints of, Generation Z. We're never going to be able to own a house. We're never going to get the pension plan, all of the various things that our parents had. So what's the point of, really endeavoring a lot? And, his basic article was, I can see their point.
Yeah, but the point that isn't made in that concept is that theirs is their generation is just greeting what all generations before ours faced. Before our generation, not everybody had a house, not everybody had a pension. What happened in the 50s to us as we grew up is that we created a bubble of expectations that had never been met before and will never be met again. So, sorry, Gen Z, sorry we set you such an unrealistic example, but get real. That's the way humans have always been.
Yeah, we're an outlier, no doubt about that.
Oh, way out, and going out too. So they won't have us to bitch at any much longer. Yeah. By the way, one of the what I would call the sleeper articles in here, I hope we've all memorized the wonderful chart about what uh, over the centuries the externalization process,
Yes.
or that chart. Just I read that, and Bob, you've made my life better every day of that I've known you. This chart is one of those super things that helped me grasp so many vectors and what we're living through. It was just wonderful. And I recommend everybody sort of memorize this chart. Now, the last line about claiming that AI has externalized reasoning, that's not true. AI can't reason its way out of a wet paper bag, but it's trying to get there. So this chart, I think, tells us that we've been doing this to ourselves for the last 200,000 years, this externalizing of our brain, and that we're at the very last level. It's just so much fun.
Well, it's sort of ironic in one of our other essays, there was a brief mention of the reaction, the romantic reaction to the Enlightenment. Um, so, I mean, the Enlightenment with its emphasis, almost total emphasis on reason as the defining human characteristics, and the romantics came along and basically kind of what Kierkegaard called, I think, made a long nose, I think was his expression about it. And certainly, really extreme would be Nietzsche, would be those two especially um, didn't see, what was it? They didn't see the worldview as pessimistic and doomed. I mean, somehow there was um, exciting possibilities, freedom from social constraints and whatnot. So that was one thing I thought reading these for all their breadth, there was some kind of a thread through them all of a lamentation. There was almost nothing of, my God, look at the possibilities that we will, we will send more people to the moon, we'll send people to Mars, we will, AI will be able to do a whole bunch of positive things. This was all a whole kaleidoscope of doom and gloom almost was interesting. I don't know if that was a conscious choice or not, but um,
So, do you think AI will do the most important things that all people throughout our entire species have wanted to be happy? Is AI going to make us happier? I don't think so.
I think Paul, I think what you're reacting to a bit on the gloom and doom stuff is the overwhelming anxiety and uncertainty that the world has, regardless of what nation you're in, and regardless of what's kind of thinking system that you've been brought up in. That there's still this uncertainty and there's the anxiety from not knowing. And the way the world is, the uncertainty, unfortunately, is more of a depressive side rather than an optimistic side.
And it's really now incomprehensibility. I think uncertainty has vanished and been replaced by total incomprehensibility, at least in my mind. It just
well,
doesn't make any sense
I
anymore.
I thought about this, and I suppose it's well, it wasn't my occupation, but it's a hazard of studying philosophy that, you know, if you compare now to children hiding under their desks when there was a bomb alert. It's hard for me to, have a lot of sympathy for everybody who thinks there's a lot more to worry about than there was in the 50s. We were worried about total annihilation of the human race by atomic bombs. I mean, that's just not trivial. And I think in one of the essays, there was some quotes from, or I thought from, Yeats about whether the center can hold, and Joan Didion, I think, who actually coined the phrase. And I thought, well, in Yeats's time, right after World War I mean, they thought the world had totally, drastically changed. It's just part of the human condition to feel this way, I think. I think we're just, always seems like our particular crisis is just the goat, and I don't think it's, I don't think so.
What you just said makes me think, for my last book club, we read The Sun Also Rises, which is a Hemingway, and not a really good Hemingway, in my opinion. But it's about these aimless, wealthy youth after World War I, wandering around Europe and drinking and having sex, basically, feeling like the world had been totally ruined because of World War I. So you're right about that. I mean,
Yeah.
you can write that book about the young people now.
Yeah.
I think the big difference, for instance, if you talk about World War One, I read a book on Verdun, the Battle of Verdun in World War One a few years ago. The Verdun battlefield, which lasted about 10 months, by the way, is still pretty much ruined in the sense that there's all kinds of unexploded ordnance still in the ground. So when they give tours of Verdun, you have to make sure you stay on the right paths. Otherwise, if you wander off, you might blow yourself up. So, Verdun has, kind of been ruined by World War I. But I think to me, the most significant piece of the readings were the poly crisis readings and videos, because I think with World War I, with World War II, with even if we're talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis, where we had to jump under our desks, which, by the way, I always thought was a lot of fun because I wanted to beat everybody else. Hey, I won! I can remember that in the 5th grade. James is smiling because he knows my football past and history. But at any rate, I think the big difference is that in the past, there was someplace else other than a Verdun, other than a Stalingrad, that you could sort of, you could go. And when you look at the polycrisis literature, basically what they're saying is we've run out of space to go. I mean, Frederick Jackson Turner's frontier hypothesis of American historiography was that the United States was this frontier that was always ready to be conquered. And, you could always, if this part got despoiled, you could always move to the next part. And there's no more parts to go to anymore. So that to me is maybe where we're in a little bit different time period than right after World War I, when Yeats wrote The Second Coming.
Bingo.
Yeah, I thought the most interesting part of the readings for me was the part about. Well, I'm losing my thread here. I've been doing some reading about a lot of things, and to me, it's all integrated into the space that says that because of the rapid changes in the way we see the world, how more connected we are through the internet now into other countries. I just finished reading also a book by Polly Letowski, written 20 years ago, about her walk around the world, a walk of 14,000 miles. You can't walk across the oceans, but she walked across every continent. And in her telling of it from her heart, she's a very Midwestern, unsophisticated, uncredentialed woman, but she's very motivated and very heartfelt and and intelligent. She talks about the feeling in each country. The fact is, through the internet, we're rubbing up against each other in ways that we never had before, and it's threatening all our sense of how the world works, who we are, how we're going to survive this. These people are awful or not. And I like these people, but not those people. And yet we're thrown together for the very first time in the way that, in a very minuscule way, the young men who were drafted at age 18, 19, 20 into World War II and got on these battleships and went around the world and then came home and could not piece together what they'd experienced with what they came home to. And the women who worked during that time out of the home for the first time, their lives changed so drastically. They rubbed against something that was so different. And we're not conditioned to believe as human beings that we don't work to accommodate change very quickly. That's not been what we needed to do until now. So I think the uncertainty and the fear and the when you hear Polly describe how people in India and other countries, not just India, would come out to see a white woman for the first time and just stare at her, thinking that she must be some other species. And this is going on all over the world at some level. I think to me, it's not an intellectual thing. It's more of it's a heart thing that it's who we are as people, and we got to figure out how to cope with this. We got to figure out who we are, what our capacities are for dealing with this.
Jane, I think what you're just talking about relates to that article on religion that was buried in those, and how young men in Gen Z now are turning to religion in large numbers. And I think the appeal, I mean, our generation was pretty atheistic, historically. But I think a lot of young people may be turning to religion because the world is so confusing and it's so hard to get your head around all of these things that you're talking about, and all of this new technology and everything, that religion offers a simple, clear narrative that people are yearning for. And I think that's interesting.
Just don't
I
read
would
the
even
Bible,
go-
or you're getting more confused.
Well, that's true.
Well, yes, I think I would go even a little deeper. I like where you're going with that, but I'm thinking that we need somehow to, I hope that religion connects people to the spirit of being a human being, because I think there's something universal there that religions have dealt with differently, but it's all this, I've come to believe, and I didn't believe this 20 years ago or 30, that we are all more alike than different. But it's in that area that we are all more alike, and that we can reach each other if we allow ourselves to go to that place and find it and look for it authentically.
Absolutely. The humanist statement you just made is perfect summary. And I would just throw out that religion does the exact opposite of what humanism does. Religion takes you outside of yourself and says, it's not my problem. It's God's will, Allah's will, fate, kismet, anything
Yeah.
but me. So almost every religion in the world that I'm familiar with, and I think that's probably 90% of them, gives humans an out, makes it not our fault. We are not the main instruments. And once you do that, then everything is possible, because you can do anything, you can get forgiveness, you can pay the priest or whatever it is you do in your particular religion, and you're off scot-free.
Yeah.
But humanism is so important because we accept the responsibility for what we do, and that we're it. We're not beholden or anything to anybody else.
Yeah. Amen.
Thank you.
So, in looking at, you looked at polycrisis, Mike. On the other side, I wanted you guys to look at Marshall McLuhan and his prediction, basically, of we are not in control of our media anymore. The media is dictating to us what the world is.
Absolutely. That's what AI is doing right before our eyes. It creeped up on us a little bit starting in the 50s, but now it's just right in our face saying we're in charge. Buzz off.
Yeah. Well, maybe not. I've just finished reading a book called, it was written quite a while ago, but it is along the stream of Marshall McLuhan, where the author, I've forgotten his name. I could go up and get it right now, but I don't want to do that. It talks about going to Papua New Guinea and showing on his camera a picture he had just taken of a man who'd never seen his own face before. And this happened in different cultures that he would go to, where people are suddenly faced with something that takes them to a place through the media that they've never been before, and how hard that is, how it takes them really out of their own spiritual place that they've thought was it. And it just takes when that spreads in a culture, it just takes a long time to cope with.
Yep. It was good enough for David. It's good enough for me, right? Yeah. The old ways are the best ways because, as you pointed out, evolution is not geared for fast change. It's geared for slow change through basically random action. We try and deal with change with an irrational process or even an emotional one, but at least it's guided. It's not totally random like evolution.
When you mentioned the media, Bob, the other thing I think about, and I think I thought that that particular portion of the readings and the videos was excellent. I went back to the Facebook discussion we had. I think it was last year sometime, where the way to drive eyeballs to the media was through conflict. The more you can raise the stakes of conflict. And obviously, that's what, the media is interested in: eyeballs, and they're going to do whatever they need to do to get those eyeballs, and conflict's a big part of it.
It bleeds, it leads.
I guess I'd never heard the phrase polycrisis before, so that was an interesting adventure. But in the video that started off talking about the Global Financial Uncertainty Index from the World Economic Forum, they asked the person who was being interviewed why the whole notion of polycrisis seemed to be kind of fading from attention. And he had two reasons I thought was interesting. One was, well, it turns out it was just something that occurred to people who used to think they understood the world, like Larry Summers. And when it turned out that the world was really not predictable, they were just somewhat forlorn, I guess. But the second one was because financial markets don't show the stress. And I find this a lot in our liberal discussions of Trump. It's like we've been expecting the financial market to fall apart because of this asshole for the last 2 years. It doesn't show any signs of doing that. I mean, it's not to say that what the polycrisis people brought up about resources and all aren't real, but only one of the other videos, or not text, stressed the fact that there will be opportunities as well as what, if you remember, the Chinese pictogram for crisis is the mixture of opportunity and danger. And so I think the financial markets are finding lots of things they're interested in investing in, which is a certain kind of optimism. So I don't know. I mean, maybe I've missed it. Maybe polycrisis has come and gone. I just missed it.
I think what's missing here is we confuse why it is people are investing. People are investing because there's a crisis, because that's where they can make a profit.
Absolutely.
You don't make a profit when the pond is still. You make it when when there's waves and danger and chaos.
Absolutely.
And that's proven by the fact that corporate profits today, while our world ecology is falling apart, while disease is spreading, Ebola is about to break loose, we got more chaos than you've literally globally than you've ever had ever, and the profits are huge because that's where the money is.
Yeah, the more risk there is, and you can ascertain where it is and put your bet on the right side, that's the stress that's made into a successful opportunity.
Yep.
I think that's how I put it in my simple language. I don't know anything about the finances, financial markets. I found it hard to follow some of that stuff, but hopefully if I continue to come to these discussions, you'll bring me up to speed a little bit better.
Yeah. Well,
Okay,
I'm going
I
to
understand
go back.
finance. Just look at the fact that world finance is a big casino. Okay, if you think of Jane, if you think of global finance as a big, huge casino in Vegas, it makes sense.
What was that one video? I think I'm remembering it from our one. Might have been something else, but I remember seeing something. I think it was in our work, the ones we had, where they had some discussion, and there were economists in the room, and then there were investment people in the room, and they came out of the talk, which was kind of a little gloom and doomy, and the economist people were more wringing their hands, whereas the finance people were more no problem. And I think part of that issue is I know I talk with my the person who handles my investments. He just doesn't think very long term. It's just not in his orientation. His view is, okay, we know what the market is. Let's put some here. Let's put some here. Let's get ourselves all nice and distributed so that if this goes well, fine. But he just doesn't think in terms of these longer term timelines. And I think that's another factor that, obviously when we're talking polycrisis, I think, we're talking certainly, probably many of us won't be around to see that if indeed something like that happens. But I do think another part of it is your purview. One of the things I think about is, the night before Rome, the Visigoth sacked Rome, how many people inside Rome thought that the next day the Visigoths were going to sack Rome? Probably not very many. And I think that was one of the points that they made, was that even though these things may be they feel predictable in the long term, the actual shift will be very quick and will not be predictable. I mean, it's not going to be, oh, we can say it's this day or this year. We have to look at long timelines, and I do think that's a dynamic that's important to consider as you look at all these scenarios.
It's even worse than that, Mike, because the Visigoths sacked Rome 3 times over a period of, say, 100 years. And each time the Romans were surprised. They never learned. It's like rebuilding San Francisco. They never learn. So
Now, when I was way back when, what struck me was a 1964 article by the Harvard Business Review that basically posited that large corporations were basically nation states within their own purview. And what has happened now is that we've gone from the nation state thing of corporations to we're being ruled by basically 7 people who are their own nation states, and they dictate what the world is going to be, whether we like it or not. And that was
parameters.
Pardon?
Within certain parameters that they don't control. But they're certainly trying to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the tech bros, as they're called.
Go ahead, Bob.
I'm sorry, who's talking that needed to?
You are.
Oh, okay. Anyway, it was called, as they're called, the tech bros. And that was one of the points that was in that 40 point discussion from Medium.
Yeah.
That this is now what's occurring. And so I see it as a direct line from the fact that the corporations way back when didn't care about whatever nationalistic laws existed, they were their own. And I think it's the same now with these 7 individuals or so.
Bingo. So
Yeah.
let's go out and arrest them and all the Trump administration, right? Oh, wait a minute. The military wouldn't let that. So
Yeah. Yeah. I'm getting the feeling, it keeps popping up. Bob, in Matt's talk last Sunday, he talked about the Krebs cycle, which is a biochemical reaction that underlies life, and how what he did not really talk about much or say very clearly is that all organic reactions that underlie life are they go both ways. There's a balance. They are not just one way, like inorganic things only go one way, but you go forward and you go back. It's a balance. And I think that we have not really learned as a race that balance is one of the things that underlies the reality and the truth of our lives. And I'm beginning to tie this little fragment to different places. Like, I don't know, I guess it's Hinduism believes that life is cyclical and that it blooms and then it dies, and it blooms and it dies, and so on. I think that there is an underlying balance, and that in order to make good decisions, you cannot look only at opportunity or only at risk. There is a balance, and you have to figure out. Oh, my husband was really good at this. He was a CEO of several high-tech companies, and his strength was in making good decisions. He would only bet on the side that he felt was more like, nothing was all yes or no or black or white. You had to bet on the side of the most slightly more likely outcome. And you had to be a good decision maker and a very up-to-date person to understand what that might be.
now he would have done very well in Vegas.
Well, he did well in life.
Yeah, good.
I'm
Well,
wondering if
that
that
was a good decision right there.
Yeah, marrying him was my good decision.
Bill, you were going to say something?
I was going to say, I think what Jane was just talking about balance is a very important idea. And I think technology in particular doesn't seem to have a lot of balance. You know, it's always forward, it's always going forward. And one of the articles about AI is that, you know, things are going to happen that we're losing the ability to predict what's going to happen or to even understand what's happening, as James was talking about. And I think so much of what we're talking about is focused around this one-way path of technology that doesn't have, I mean, there's governors and things like that, but mostly technology proceeds in a forward direction no matter what.
Yeah, but the no matter what is counterbalanced by the people out there who are either rioting, demonstrating, or voting. And I think that they haven't thought about that very deeply and don't understand its power.
Well, I hope you're right.
I hope so too. I mean, that's just, I tend to be an optimistic person.
Yeah.
My life has been better than I ever thought it could have been. So I think about, well, how did that happen? And I think a lot of it is if you look in a certain direction, you see things that you don't otherwise see.
Yeah.
So a question for you all, since we're talking about polycrisis and that being a very complex system, with all the things happening in the world and all the interconnectedness, can this polycrisis system ever achieve equilibrium?
Well, that's the question.
Do we want it to?
It's
You know,
called it's called the heat death of the universe. Yes, it's
Yeah.
coming.
Yeah,
It's
I don't think that's a good thing.
No,
I don't either.
well, I think the graph that was most interesting or struck me the most was the I guess they call it the hockey stick graph. I don't know if we saw it, but you know, it had all those various things, and then you know it bends up at the end. One of the reasons that graph is some kind of famous to me is I was at Penn State when Michael Mann was there. I don't know how many of you remember the name of Michael Mann, but he's been one of the leading climate change scientists of our generation. And they somebody hacked his email system or something, and got a lot of these emails, and they thought they had proven that it was all a big scam, and it had to go through a review board and all this stuff. And I happened to be able to go to a couple of lectures that Dr. Mann gave at Penn State when he was there. And I mean, it was, he was being raked over the coals and different things like this. So I saw this hockey stick, in a lot of his lectures. But at any rate, what, really impressed me or kind of, scared the bejesus out of me is I thought his was the only hockey stick, with the climate change. And then that one graph that showed, oh no, there's about 20 other hockey sticks going on at the same time. And they're all coming to the same point. And that's where I kind of went, oh, well, maybe we're not in such good shape after all. Who knows?
Yeah.
So Brad and Francisco, we haven't heard from you. Do you have any thoughts on the topic?
I was an engineer. I didn't have time to study Roman times. So a lot of what you guys are saying are like, oh, I don't know that there's so much other things to learn and discover. I've only come to the realization, yeah, I had my head down basically and during work times. And now looking, it's like, wow, this is pretty bad. And only started to get the idea recently that no, we've been through times 100 years ago when we had a few people running the United States, Andrew Carnegie and folks like that. It seems things seem to go in waves, or the pendulum back and forth as to what happens. So maybe this isn't as scary as before, but I don't know that we have a lot of room for recovery once um, once it's realized how far we've gone in terms of damaging the planet. Um, so I remember when we toured Panama, and it's like, wow, this is some really interesting, wonderful red soil you have here. Well, and the guide said it's good for about 2 years once we deforest an area for something, and then because it's no longer protected by the rainforest canopy, then it goes sterile pretty quickly. And I guess as long as there's more to cut down, people just keep expending. But yeah, it doesn't appear that a lot of us are meaning sustainability. I'm sorry if I went off track there.
Yeah, Francisco, do you have any thoughts on the topic today?
Once again, I haven't done my homework. I'm an engineer too. My only comment I find very interesting all the things that you guys are talking about, but I think it is somewhat Western centric, US centric. Kind of people I talk to are not worried too much about technology change, high cost of living, or climate change. They are worried about, let me see, today is the 26th. When do I get my next paycheck? Am I going to have enough to eat between now and the end of the month? People that are now in Cuba, that's what they're worried about. Or in Peru, yeah, or in Mexico, am I going to be shot this week? How many people died in my town and in many other places? So I don't know. These things that you talk about are important, but I think we need to place them in context that we are the 1% minority in the world. And the rest of the world is, as I said, concerned about survival.
So
That's
we should eliminate all of these Zooms because we're wasting our breath. Is that what you're saying? Because nobody cares, nobody listens. We're listening, right?
No, but it's a good perspective. I just got back from Ecuador, as many of you know, and it was a really incredible experience because you saw exactly what Francisco's talking about. People who, when they wake up in the morning, They think about very different things than we think about. I heard a very incredible thing several years ago. It talked about the 1% in this regard. It said, if you've never woken up wondering where your next meal is going to come from, and if you've never woken up wondering if you're going to have a roof over your head, and number three, if you can read, those three things. If those three things have been true of you all your life, you are living in the 1% of all of humanity. Now, a big factor in that is, of course, literacy, because literacy rates, even through the 1500s in Europe were quite low, but it does cast a different context on a lot of things.
Bingo.
Yeah, Francisco, you're completely right. And if you didn't see in the readings, but there was a lot of articles that I put on from the view of various countries around the world, whether it be in the Southeast Asia, China, India, Europe, South America, Latin America, Mexico, and all their views of what their concerns and anxieties were. And a lot of them were, as you were saying, the basic stuff. Do I have food? Do I have housing? Do I have a job? What am I going to do tomorrow? Can I afford tomorrow? And the anxiety and the uncertainty of all of that, it lays heavy on their heads.
Yeah. That was the meat of Polly Letevsky's message after walking around the world. And it took her 5 years. She spent a lot of time in parts of the world that we cannot even imagine. And she's talking about a very personal experience of what it's like to be in India, and not in the big cities, but in the villages, or and not knowing. She's just got a little cart with her water and her clothing and a few snacks, and trying to figure out where her next meal is going to come from and where she's going to be sleeping that night. And it gave her, when she finally returned to the US, she had a whole different feeling about what it was to be an American, what it was to have the privileges that we have of security, even at the level that many of us are complaining about, security and consistency and opportunity. So the question in my mind is, how do we throw our weight behind our educational system and educate people, young people, to think about not just our own country, but the world and how we fit into it, and how we really, even in the Trump administration, we lead the world by example of what we have and what we don't have to worry about. How do we put our weight behind that?
And do we want to put our weight behind that? Is the American way necessarily?
No, I don't mean put our weight behind the American way. Put our weight behind the fact that we are a connected world, and that we are what we do matters not just for ourselves. It matters for everyone out there. If you want to look back to when there was no Gutenberg press, how do we become the guys who make it safe to print books, and so on?
The one thing that the one caveat I would say to what Francisco and I were just talking about is, of course, to the degree the polycrisis folks are correct, it will certainly affect the poor in ways that are even beyond us. I have a friend who's working in a project in Suriname right now. Suriname is an interesting country because it's one of, I think, 3 countries in the world that's carbon neutral, because, of course, their settlements are largely right on the coast, and most of the country is jungle that's been untouched for centuries. Well, now with the rare earth minerals that are, becoming so big, and gold, of course, people that are getting back into the country, some legal, some illegal. Obviously, the country wants economic development, so they are allowing some mining to get back there, but also some people are going back there on their own. And so what's starting to happen is, for some of the indigenous peoples that have lived there, in some cases for many generations, before slavery, but also the Maroons, who were escaped slaves during the Dutch period of slavery in Suriname. Well, their water sources are now becoming polluted. The fish, that they have depended on for generations to catch and eat and live. These fish are dying in the streams because, of course, these minerals and this mining is affecting these indigenous people. They don't understand. They don't know why. They wake up one day and all of a sudden there are these dead fish in the water. And so they have no sense, of course, of the concepts of the polycrisis that we've been talking about. But those chickens come home to roost on everyone.
One other thing that I'd like to mention too is that there's a difference in the way people are looking at things. For instance, in the Western culture, we have a certain set of ways of looking at things that have been ingrained in us. In the Eastern culture, it's different. They have a different, more holistic way of looking at things rather than a linear, syllogistic way. And though that has to be taken into account too, is how they view things and how they see things as different in their own view of the zeitgeist, current zeitgeist that they live in.
I love the example of the large fish tank, and you ask a Westerner to describe the contents of the large decorative
Right.
fish tank, and they'll talk about the big fish, whereas the Easterner will talk about the seaweed and the rocks and how it all interacts, and the water, how it all interacts together. That's what interests them. So that was one of the most brilliant, short, fast, easy ways to get people to understand the difference between East and West, because it's so true.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if we could just in the West begin to understand that we're not really individuals in the way we thought we were, that we're so connected, and we could only understand the world through a more systems way of thinking, if you want to put it from the head, and in a relationship with each other to start with, but then other species, every stone, every rock, then we might become more Eastern. But it's, oh my God, it's such a long path.
I think
Well,
the other
we
thing
don't
is,
have to worry about that. But anyway, yes.
I think in the West, we're beginning to learn that we don't have all the answers. I think that it's particularly interesting in this Ukraine war and in the Iran war. The low tech is all of a sudden winning, and Pete Hesketh and all of his missiles and everything isn't really accomplishing much. And I'm wondering if that's in a way tied into what this Eastern way of thinking that 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 the West may no longer be, certainly the US, but the West may no longer be the center of everything, and that maybe it'll get diversified a little bit. And because we've been so dominant, at least in our own minds, we're dominant. I don't know whether the rest of the world thinks that way, but you know, a part of it's our money. When we cut out USAID and all these children are dying all over the world for just a small amount of money that we were spending on that. That has a big effect. But I'm wondering whether our way of thinking, our Western way of, part of this zeitgeist thing is that the Western way of thinking is no longer as effective in this new reality that we're somehow evolving into that we don't understand yet.
I'm fantasizing that the Gen Zs that don't want to work and don't see the future of work and careers put a backpack. They put a backpack on their life, and they go across the world, and they see some of these other ways of operating in person. They're the potential there for a mass movement of understanding that we older folks when I think back about 50 years ago, going into an airport and watching a few people get on airplanes, and now you go to an airport, you can hardly find your own gate. There are that many more people traveling of every age, but the youngest generation has the most capacity to do that because they can work remotely.
Yeah.
And they can put on backpacks and go a long way.
You know, the point about the new things we're learning in the Ukraine and Iran wars, it's really the same lesson we should have learned but didn't in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, we got our butts kicked by people with literally with bamboo sticks.
You know, it's not just this is not a recent thing. The
Right.
Spanish were able, well, if you look at Mesoamerica, when they came, the Western cultures came in with horses that the indigenous people did not have. There were a few cultures that knew how to put stones in a sling and throw them so effectively that could hobble the horses. And 10 men could take down 100 horses. It's the low tech stuff that we've
Yeah.
just we've minimized. We don't think it's important.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting in our conversation because, of course, there were a lot of facets to all these sources, but one of the facets haven't really talked about much about is that the degradation of the sense of community, where it came up in several of the entries. I think the way I see the zeitgeist right now is that especially since the 70s, we've been very devoted to a transactional view of life. We went from Kennedy and ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, to Ronald Reagan, who said the government isn't the solution, it's the problem. And we've totally, with Trump, you have the perfection of transactional living.
Yeah.
You know, everything is about a deal between two parties. Third parties be damned. You know, they're just collateral damage, and that came up in some of our entries, which I thought was fascinating because it does tie into the poly crisis. That if you're going to solve those problems, you're going to need a little more community thinking than just can we buy the minerals from the native population?
Yeah. It's kind of interesting to me, and this could be just me seeing this, that some of the young political people running for office in the U.S. Are successful because they are more community minded. I'm thinking of this young woman in Michigan. I can't even remember, Gretchen something. They just seem to have a different point of view, and it has to do with everything around the kitchen table. What do you think? What do you feel? And making a community out of their effort to enter, their willingness to enter into this political fray.
Reagan also said, remember, in contrast to Kennedy, I think one of his his real buzz lines in the debate with Carter was, "Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?" That's another big contrast to Kennedy's line.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, did anyone read the anthropological paper?
Yes.
Okay.
don't-
Can you stick around afterwards for a couple seconds, James?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll have to warn you, I'm a Socrates man, not Plato or Aristotle, but go ahead. I'll hang
All
in.
right. Hang in for a second
Yep.
on that, because it revolves around our previous discussion we had privately about my work that I did back on the technological sort in the 70s.
I noticed
Mike,
that.
you can stay too if you want to on that one,
Okay.
or anyone else that wants to.
I'm sorry, which
There's an anthological paper in there that's very, very long, and
Heidegger and the other boys in the band, right?
yeah,
it was
and
the one.
it deals with the symbiosis of AI and human as
the four possible
yes.
ongoing relationships between AI and
which extended out work I did in the 70s with a group of people that were developing a theory based on the behavioral unit of man and machine.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did read that.
Oh, great. So anyway, it's almost noon. So let me get over to to next month's topic. How many of you have heard of the paradox of tolerance?
Not I.
Pardon? None of you. Okay.
No, I've heard of it.
My
Not
cat.
by that name.
My cast, that's because we've had discussion on it.
Huh.
And it was first introduced by philosopher Karl Popper in 1945 in his book, The Open Society and Its Enemies. The paradox of tolerance states that if a society is tolerant without limit, its ability to be tolerant will eventually be seized or destroyed by the intolerant.
Correct.
The question for next month is, are we globally living in one of those moments?
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, it does.
There was just a PS to that. There was an incident years ago again at Penn State, very highly intolerant, that really shook the campus. And one of the signs that went around was "No hate at Penn State." And if you translate that was, yeah, we will be tolerant of everything except intolerance.
Yep.
So that was sort of my first introduction, not via Karl Popper. That was another introduction, but of the what Bob is talking about. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So there we go. As usual, anyone have any last comments they'd like to make before we wander off?
Well,
Thanks,
Bob, you're
Bob.
stirring up
Thank you again, Bob.
stirring up the swamp again next month, so I'm looking forward to that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank
This
you
was
again,
fun.
Bob, and everyone else.
Thank you.
Those who want to leave, we'll see you. Those that want to stick around and talk a little bit about this article, you can stick around.
I'll stick around.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, everyone. There we are. I guess it's us four.
The
Yeah.
diehards.
So a little background, Paul, so you know.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s, mid 70s to late 70s, I was a grad student in anthropology at Portland State. And my mentor and another friend, they wanted to develop from scratch a theory to allow predictability of either success or failure of any task. And they took it in 3 steps. One was the technological step, one was a managerial step, and one was a nation state type of step. So that we could make a prediction on a micro or macro level. Now, I was there for the development of the technological step, where we had a group of us meet all summer every day with a blank slate to start out, and it consisted of my mentor, my professor of anthropology, another fellow that had 3 degrees from the University of Chicago, advanced degrees in sociology, anthropology, and philosophy, PhD in industrial psychology, a PhD candidate, a dissertation away in system science, and a PhD candidate away or a dissertation away in computer science, and me. It was one of the most heady experiences I had. The premise basically that we developed on was that to be able to measure whether anything would be a success or failure, depending on how you describe the task, was the creation of a behavioral unit that comprised of a man and machine, so that you could take any combination, whether it be from prehistoric man with a spear to highly integrated systems with man and machine working together. The test case was the traffic controllers in the Portland airport that we used to make our predictions and test it. And what we found there is basically the input was so great that it overwhelmed the the controllers, and so the task was basically failure on that. Flipping forward to this article on AI and the four possibilities, I saw that as an extension of this work of the symbiosis of man and machine, the AI being the machine. And I've had arguments with both James and Mike about this, and just we never had a chance to do face to face just to flesh this out a little bit. So, what were your comments, gentlemen?
Well, I had to agree. First, I wanted to agree with James because I also made a printout of that little chart about the um, extension of or the externality of human capabilities. I've often commented to people about, Socrates complaining that writing would destroy memory. So it was just fun for someone to say, "Oh yeah, but what about these other ones?" I really appreciated that. That was really good. Um, and I did like the fact that he he basically says this is going to be a sociological problem. Um, I know in that book about in COVID's wake, the authors make a claim that, it wasn't it wasn't only a medical problem, it was a societal problem, and society failed the task, even though medicine succeeded. So anyway, so I really like that, his sensitivity to how those decisions will be made, which path.
Yeah, I was really interested in the symbiotic relationship path, but also the one that has the possibility of the machine making all our decisions for us.
Well,
Yeah.
isn't that what is I can't remember his name. That was the first speaker we saw last year from Oxford. He's Jewish. You're all, who
Yeah.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he makes the statement that where AI is different is that it is its own agent, and that every other machine that has ever existed, from the wheel to fire to whatever, has not had the capacity to develop its own agency. And that's, when you're talking about, according to him, the first time ever where a machine has the capacity to develop its own agency. And then it's sort of the cat is out of the bag. And I guess we don't know at that particular point, but the worry is that it will do things that are, we can't control it anymore. A baseball bat, you can use it to hit somebody over the head, or you can use it to hit a baseball. The bat itself has no agency, but AI apparently has agency.
I'd like us to focus, if we can, on the history of man and machine. From the very beginning, man has made machines that do two things: kill or degrade the environment. We've got plows for agriculture, we've got swords for killing. Basically, all of our technology, all of our machine interaction has been one of those two activities: killing or degrading the environment. Given that over 200,000 years of history, that constant basic fundamental relationship between us and our machines, I think the conclusion is that the odds are that the machines are going to win. And I think we see that now as an inevitability. I mean, when the federal government of the United States passes a law, Section 2030 of the AI Regulatory Act, or whatever it's called, saying you can't sue the AI companies for any damage they do on their systems. What we're seeing here is our government is supporting this basic, fundamental historical fact that machinery is lethal to humankind. Why do we think the future is going to be any different than the last 200,000 years, is my question.
I'm looking at the guy's little graph here. I guess I wanted to ground this on that or connect that. So you would call what he calls algorithmic civilization that the algorithms govern.
Yeah.
Okay, I
Yep.
just want to make sure I was tracking with you.
Yeah. Where we end up is at best, we end up on the four possible resolutions. We end up at best as the cocooned human. We will become dormice. We will become little stray life forms on a machine planet. Um, and again, I've spent 70 years studying history, and I don't see any way around the straight line vector of humans plus machine equals destruction.
Which is why I
Well,
like to bring up a lot of times, James, the movie Wall-E,
Yes.
which I don't know if you're familiar with the Pixar movie Wall-E,
Oh yeah.
but it's something to look at because it predicts mankind basically turning into nothing and being served by the and guided by the robots.
Well, and you can go back even farther than that. The very first Mad magazine, the second story in the very first Mad magazine is called The Blob. And it's
Ah,
a story about not the blob. Maybe that's it. Anyway, uh, the point is that humans become so reliant on their machinery that they turn into blobs. Their arms don't work, their legs don't work. They're motored around in mobility machines, and then the machine breaks and they all die. Dormice. So this is I guess hadn't thought about it, but I think my, my view of the article about the four possible resolutions actually has an original basis in Mad Magazine as well as a lot of history.
Well, the other thing is the quote unquote Anthropocene, which is, I guess, says James, that's about 200,000 years. It in geologic time, we're a little blip. And why would we think we're going to be anything more than a blip? And my interesting thought for the day is when you look at the degradation of the environment and other species, as James points out, is that when we're gone, the other species will rejoice. Hey, we're going to get another shot at this thing. It may have to start out with cockroaches, but hey, you got to start someplace.
I think the cockroaches are going to inherit the earth.
Well, there's no doubt they can. They're very good at it. And the other interesting thing I actually read that I thought was pretty. I read an interesting article that humans were, according to this article anyway, somewhat of an evolutionary anomaly and mistake in the sense that there were some very unique factors that brought about the incredible rise in our intelligence, especially our language capabilities that they have actually observed in some other organisms, but that it was kind of what's the right word? A perfect storm that maybe brought us about that is not very likely. Of course, in geo in not geologic time, I should say, universal time is it's going to happen, but that we were kind of a mistake to begin with.
Well, we're also the most resilient species known throughout history. I mean, of all time, we're the most resilient. We were down, there was
Yeah.
believe new evidence says we were down to like 25,000
Yeah, I heard there was the same
species.
thing.
And we we figured out, hey, this isn't working out, guys. And we have ballooned to 8 or 9 billion. Now that's what I call a comeback. That's what I
Yeah.
call resilience. I mean, we're really good at kicking ass. We're just not very good at ultimately surviving, but that's different.
Well, we have cognitive capacities that just our many multiple, I mean, our adaptability based on our cognitive capacities. We may have painted ourselves into a corner this time around, but we'll see.
Paul, I also wanted to tell you that when I found that article on the discussion about Jaspers and Heidegger, I was thinking specifically of you.
Oh, thank you. I was reading that. It was very interesting. I didn't know much about Jaspers, but I had a seminar on being in time once, and in another class we studied what is called thinking. So I was quite familiar, well, sort of familiar with Heidegger. It'd been a long time. So that was another whole aspect of your selection list that intrigued me. Like it was a philosophical look at Zeitgeist, and the I've been studying Pierre Bourdieu, so of course he talks about the habitus, our predispositions and our background embed in our body. And I think that's what part of what's missing from our discussion. I mean, AI is the Enlightenment come home to roost. I mean, it is the claim of being able to have a rational, logical being with no religious, no national, no familial, any of those kind of non-rational influences on it. It's the Enlightenment man perfected. And the Romanticism was an early reaction to just the thought of that happening. So I think humans may turn out that their emotions and their imaginations are not exportable. I forget whatever the word was. They're not. They can't be made into externalities. So in a way, it's not the failure of the Enlightenment project. It's the culmination of it.
I don't know. I can't get over the fact that LLMs are basically large Bayesian decision trees that slip and slide according to the prompt you ask them.
So,
Well, Bob, remember what was the very first life form? It was a single cell thingy with no brain, no anything. And how did it manage to survive and reproduce? It reacted to prompts and nothing else. It didn't
it
have a
slipped and
single
slided.
thought in its brain. So, since that's the basis of life, humans are just a great big collection of cells. So, why would our great big collection of cells be anything different than the single cell? It's just we're reacting to prompts. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing. Um, that's how life survives. It reacts to things. It's not life isn't some sort of ethereal, mysterious thing in the universe. It's a living, squirming, striving, fearful, hungry thing. And the fact that we've put some clothes on it, I don't think makes much difference. I'm
Well, the
perfectly
problem
happy.
is, the question is that the whole thing either works or doesn't work based on the type of prompt it gets from the human.
And vice versa. Humans work the same way. And
Mhm.
and I have to disagree with I forget who was just saying it. AI is not a rational thing at all. It's a collection of human data, and a collection of human data of necessity is a chaotic piece of garbage. I mean, think about it. Look what we're creating. So I don't think the Enlightenment is in any way exemplified in AI. I think more, like I said, a recycle bin is more an AI metaphor. But yeah, there's nothing, Bob, there's nothing wrong with just being reacting to things because that's how we started in the first place. If we hadn't, if that very first thing that somehow managed to to find itself as a single cell, stopped reacting to prompts, we wouldn't be here.
Well, I once took a course and the whole course was on being in time. It was taught by, I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Joe Cocklemans. He was a very prominent Heidegger interpreter that was at Penn State at the time. Went through the German gymnasium, spoke 7 languages, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, yeah.
One of those types. But at any rate, one of the things that we really explored, and I think this has a lot to do with our discussion today, because of and I can't claim that I understand being in time, obviously. That's a big book and a hard book. But one of the things that I did get out of it is that humans are definitely oriented as we are future oriented entities. And the whole notion of existential time, per Heidegger, and which is why I think Heidegger wanted to go back to sort of that, that primitive existence that he had there in the Black Forest with no electricity, etc., because he kind of saw this. But humans are constantly in this process of how do I move forward? How do I move forward? What's the next best thing that I can invent and concoct? And on the one hand, it's AI. And on the other hand, it's religion, because the big point, as you know, in being in time is the notion of death. I mean, that's the big, Heidegger plays this point, very clearly that we are being towards death and we don't know how to deal with death. And so we engineer a solution to death, and that's called religion. And it's pathological and it's crazy, but it's in a response to the dilemma that we find ourselves with the problem of death and our inability to overcome it. So it really does have a lot to do with, in my view, a lot to do with the discussions we've been having.
Bingo.
In while I was in a senior seminar and being in time, and I happened to go to see The Seventh Seal,
Oh my.
Bergman's movie, and
Yeah.
I remember that that the knight is having this ongoing relationship with death, and he goes into a little church to confess, and rationally, you've seen enough movies, right? Who is he going to be confessing to but death, right? I mean, you can't surprise me. I know, I get the gag, right? But at one scene, death, there's a Bergman zooms in on Death's face. Death turns his face and it's white. And I just froze. I just said, this is, shows fleeing in the face of death. This is facing death. It was like the book came alive for me. And I've just always remembered that and admired Bergman for how he just manipulated the audience, just grabbed you, that was, so that's how I remember Heidegger, because I've reminded of fleeing in the face of death. So I love this article. It was fun, and I didn't know much about Jaspers, so that was good to have some other.
My summary of Heidegger was also at Penn State, written on the wall of the basement of the men's bathroom in the library, and it's set in a big magic marker, and we've all seen it. Life sucks, and then you die.
Life sucks, and you die. There you go.
Yeah, well, I've never actually, since we're all here gathered together talking about death, I've never really understood why people are so concerned about it. Every time you go to sleep, and you've done that thousands of times in your life, you're essentially dead. Okay. And then you wake up. Okay. So we've been through the process literally tens of thousands of times by now. So one of those times we don't wake up. Well, are we going to know? No, it's over. Bingo. We've had a hell of a lot of fun, experienced a lot of joy, had great conversations, and that's the way it is. It's I've never I just I don't understand why people are afraid of it.
It took me about 50 years. I agree with you 100%, James. It just took me 50 years longer than you to get there. That's why you're a lawyer and I'm not.
No. That's
Okay.
causation of why I became a
Okay.
lawyer has nothing to do with our
Okay.
discussion.
Oh, James, by the way, just as a side point, Wendy is now a lawyer.
What's that?
My daughter Wendy is now an attorney.
Excellent. Excellent. What is she doing?
Well, she's working in the same office that she has been for the 25 years, and they specialize mainly in intellectual properties.
Okay. Is so she's
So
not a
patents
litigator.
and
She's not a litigator.
copyright. Yeah.
Not a
Plus,
litigator.
they'll probably expand out and get a couple public defender contracts to keep her busy at the beginning.
Very good. Well,
That would
that's a hard. How old is she now?
She's 55 now.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing law school at 50. It just,
Well, what she did was a mentoring program. They have a program in Washington State where you can be, you do all the coursework, but you're mentored by an attorney.
Wonderful.
So her boss mentored her, was
Wonderful.
accepted by the Washington State Bar, and so she's followed in the footsteps of Lincoln.
There you go.
let's hope not. Take that back, Bob. Hopefully she'll do something productive in her life, not like Lincoln, who tore the country apart for no reason. But anyway,
Anyway,
yeah.
so sorry about that, Paul. It's just a personal note. My daughter is.
No, that's
that's
we appreciate the public PSAs,
That's
public
good, yeah.
service announcements.
Yeah, I have one of those daughters that's an attorney, so I appreciate the effort it took to get there.
Oh, wow.
This whole thing about the AI reminds me of there's a couple of movies that I always think of, Dark City and of course The Matrix, where you have alien creatures who want to dominate humans specifically for their emotions. The alien creatures are far more advanced intellectually and technologically, but they want to subjugate humans to basically kind of surf on their emotions, if the way I always look at it.
The other aspect of that is the Star Trek thing with Data, who puts the emotion chip
Oh,
in
yeah.
Oh,
and
yes.
goes bonkers. So
Yeah.
same
Yeah.
idea.
I'm afraid my alien stuff goes very, very basic back to the Heinlein short story, To Serve Mankind.
Oh,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
to serve man.
I think it was there was an episode of The Twilight Zone, I think, about people who, was it like they went to a cafe and they had those things on the wall that play music, but it would give them advice. And these people would just kind of sit there and be immobilized because they had to keep asking it for advice, what they should do. So that's, I think, the fear that James is concerned about, that people will lose their agency, their initiative. So
It just won't be necessary anymore. Once once we complete, I mean, our whole history has been to create machines that will destroy us and the world. So one way or another, that's where we're headed. I don't see anything changing direction.
I think you're right. The polycrisis thing hit me pretty big, Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it might. It was a new term to me.
Yeah. Very, very new. Hey, Bob, I got to sign up. A quick question. I'm coming the 18th. Is the week before or the week after better for you in terms of hanging around?
Doesn't make any difference. Come both weeks.
Okay, I'll let you know what's going on then.
Okay.
Okay. Hey, thanks a lot, guys. I got to blast off.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll
Take
see.
care.
I'm the chef. I have to go make dinner before there's
All right.
comment on the platform.
It's
Yeah,
my
well,
nap
thanks.
time, so that's
All
my
right.
excuse.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for
Thank you.
sitting.
Bye.
on.
See you later.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.